GJA Casisia Bontina Enya Tutuyo Ehina Yebejin Ferho Yahanme Chame Yayen Enya Biribi Obodie wo yen suru kraka Obodie wo yen swayeden Obodie wo yen surayeden Yen suru kraka Yen suru kraka Obodie wo yen surubua Obodie wo yen surubua Abon nidyan yamine prani hoye shenaro Yahanu mutye chame yayen Yahanu mutye na chame yayen GJA Casisia Bontina Enya Tutuyo Ehina Yebejin Ferho Yahanme Chame Yayen Enya Biribi Obodie wo yen suru krakra Obodie wo yen swayeden Obodie wo yen surayeden Yen suru krakra Yen suru krakra Obodie wo yen surubua Obodie wo yen surubua Abon nidya nyami nepra nihoye shenwaro House, oh Lord, we pray, make it safe by night and day. Bless this wall so firm and stout, keeping want and trouble out. Bless the roof and chimneys tall, let thy peace lie over. Bless this door that it may be ever open to joy and love. Bless this window shining bright, letting in God's heaven heavenly light. Bless the head of blazing there, when smoke ascending like a prayer. Bless the people here within, keep them pure and free from sin. Bless us all that it may be fit, oh Lord, to dwell within. Bless us all that we can attain. We will dwell, oh Lord, with thee. Blood to Baba Kana Nigban Kana Kana Nigban Kana Kana Nigban Yarai Toy Nenyen Yarai Toy Nenyen Ha blood to Baba Kana Nigban Maude plodet ye kana nigban, maude plodet ye kana nigban, maude plodet ye kana nigban, kana nigban, kana nigban, maude plodet
Oh, come on. I think he deserves a better round of applause. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this memorable occasion. The gentleman who will be speaking tonight is somebody we all know, we all admire. And this year, he was honored by the Ghana Journalist Association. I'm not going to say so much, because I know when you listen to him talk, what he will say is going to shake this room. So I'm not going to say much about that. But I'm rather going to invite COP Dr. Dampari to give us the opening prayer. And my name is Vivian Kai. Look, welcome to this event.
Thank you, Vivian. Please, let's have a word of prayer. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for opportunity in your presence this evening. It is our prayer that this function that has begun in your name will end successfully in your name. And as the speaker comes forth to speak, you take full control of him and the ideas you've given to him for him to share with us. We will end up individually taking something home as we go out there to continue our life, to fear sin more than death. In the name of our Father, in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Adom Ochri. I'm a news reporter, and I'm here to put in context the reason why we have gathered here. Oh, so Wester Mensah, good evening. So we have gathered here to have a conversation and to attempt also to rethink the national conversation, to have a conversation and to change the conversation. It's a very important step because there are arms of government, as we know. There is the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. One of these arms of government, which is the judiciary, is not able to publicly engage. So straight away, as a society, building yourself alongside the tenets of democracy, you have a sensitive arm of government as the judiciary who, by the nature of their work, cannot publicly engage. And so we don't know what the judiciary is thinking. We don't benefit from the wealth of knowledge of the judiciary in our national discourse, except when cases come to them, except when they are invited by litigants to make a pronouncement one way or the other. And when they make the pronouncement, they are unable to defend themselves. They cannot come in the public to talk. So that's the judiciary is gone. Then there are two others, the legislature and the executive. Both of them are heavily partisan. They speak political language. They see things through the perspective of politics. Only few of them, the righteous ones, don't do that. But by and large, politicians at the executive and the legislature all speak the political language. That means that we are left with a deficit of a real conversation by the people. And so in the 17th century or so in England, they identified another arm of government, the Fourth Estate of the realm. And it is within the platform of the Fourth Estate that there is a ventilation of national issues in a manner that allows the citizens to participate, in a manner that brings experts on board, and in a manner that rethinks the conversation. So that historically, societies that have collapsed, you will notice, are those that have not had a very strong Fourth Estate of the realm. Societies, especially in Africa, in West Africa, in all of the civil wars that you've had, are those that have not had, they have not generated, they have not invested in, and they have not sufficiently established a Fourth Estate of the realm. The kind of tension that exists in a country like Nigeria, and if you compare Nigeria to, say, La Côte d'Ivoire and Liberia, the reason why La Côte d'Ivoire and Liberia could blow up with less historical tension is because they did not sufficiently invest in the Fourth Estate of the realm. I went to Liberia during the Civil War, and they did not have the Côte d'Ivoire during the Civil War, they did not have a single private radio, they did not have private newspaper, they did not have private television. Everything was controlled by the state. In that circumstance, the media becomes part of the state. the media that is controlled by the state becomes part of the state, and so they are not able to adequately discharge the duty of creating the synthesis out of the conversation as a fourth estate of the realm. Why Ghana has succeeded up until this stage is because we have nurtured and generated a fourth estate. I think that we need to move a step forward beyond where we are and generate that kind of fourth estate that people have confidence in. Not just confidence in their impartiality, but confidence also in their expertise to be able to distill the issues and to be able to deal with the matters. It is in this regard that I'd like to congratulate journalists who work in and who have expertise, but work in an area where their reward could be better elsewhere. That is where what we need to, that's the tide that we need to stem in this country, where people of high caliber, young people, either do not choose the media as a first choice job, they want to go to somewhere else, be a banker and be a lawyer and all of that. Can you imagine if Isan Kumar was a journalist with all the expertise that he has, if he was not practicing law and he was the editor of the Daily Graphic? Can you imagine where Ghana would be? Can you imagine the quality of analysis, the editorials, the front page stories? And if as editor of the Graphic, he could earn twice what he's earning now, that will make the story even better. That is the story elsewhere. In England, people leave the top universities and they want to be journalists. It's about time that our country, if we want to sustain the next 25 years of constitutional democracy, must look critically at that fourth estate of the realm and sufficient investment in it so that the brightest of our people want to do that as a first choice job. In this regard, I'd like to congratulate our speaker, Bernard Avle, for deciding to continue to stay in the media. Many of his colleagues, his contemporaries, and people of his caliber, because of the small salary that we all earn, will not like to stay in the media. They will go elsewhere. But Bernard has stayed the course, and I was delighted. All of us were getting frustrated that he was not being sufficiently recognized over the last 4 years, and we're thinking that might get to him and he might leave the job. But we're all happy that he has been recognized as the Journalist of the Year. It's long overdue anyway, but it has come now. And that he's taken up upon himself to have events like this to generate a discussion and have a rethinking of the whole Ghanaian enterprise. I think that I will, at this stage, invite him to come on board so that we can listen to him. I'm hoping that this is only the first series, the first of many series of conversations like this that we'll be having, led by the media and led by trusted media personalities. It is my greatest pleasure now to invite on stage Koku, Avle, Aloski, Liverpool. Thank you, Bernard.
Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Paul, for that very flattering introduction. You make it seem as if I condescended to become a journalist. But I want young journalists coming up to know that journalism is a very high calling, that if you are privileged to be called into, you should consider yourself blessed, and you should find space to be grateful to God for giving you the opportunity to be a journalist. I'm not sure why I qualify to lead a conversation about a national discourse. Because when I was very young, I was always being told to keep quiet. And when I was in Presec, my very good friend Daniel Chachu, he was sat next to me. So when Mr. Kote comes and there's noise in the class and he's looking for somebody to accuse of talking, my name will be on the list and I can't deny it, even if I didn't talk. Because nobody will be surprised that Bernard was talkative. So after years of asking me to keep quiet, I think I've gotten to a stage where people now say, you talk so much, we have to free you to talk. And I'm grateful that something I like doing has led to awards and recognition and salary. And it's a real blessing. I'll be taking sips of water so I don't get excited and enter the preaching mode. But I want to first acknowledge Citi FM and Citi TV for this great platform. I want to acknowledge Samuel Atamensa, the MD, and the management. I also want to acknowledge the Ghana Journalists Association, led by Avle, for the honor done me for endorsing this platform and for giving me that award to be Journalist of the Year. This evening, I'm going to try and provoke you to 3 paradoxes in Ghanaian society. Then we would discuss 5 shifts we must have to move the nation to its next level. And I'll end with a call for balance. I start with a longish quote, which I paraphrase. The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings but shorter. We have wider roads but narrower viewpoints. We spend more but we have less. We buy more but we enjoy less. We have bigger houses but smaller families. More conveniences but less time. We have more degrees but less sense. More knowledge but less judgment. We have many more experts but even more problems. We have more medicine but less wellness. We have multiplied our possessions but we have reduced our values. We talk too much, we love too seldom, and hate too often. We've learned how to make a living but we don't have a life. We've added years to life, but not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but we have trouble crossing the street to meet a new neighbor. We have conquered outer space, but not inner space. We've done larger things, but not better things. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted the soul. We've split the atom, but not our prejudice. These are days of fast foods and slow digestion. Taller men, but shorter character. Steeper profits but shallower relationships. These are days of 2 incomes but more divorce. Days of fancier houses but broken homes. Days of quick trips, disposable diapers, throwaway morality, one-night stands, overweight bodies, pills to wake you up, pills to put you to bed, pills to make you happy, pills to keep you quiet. These are days of showrooms in windows but no showcase lives. Paraphrasing George Carlin. This long introduction was to set our minds ready for 3 of the many paradoxes I see in Ghanaian society. Paradox 1, activity without productivity. Ghana's population is nearing 30 million. Our rebased GDP is about $50 billion. Singapore has a population of 5 million. That's a sixth of our population. Their GDP is $300 billion. That's 6 times our GDP. Despite the hustle and bustle at Kantamanto, at traffic lights, at Xiamen Magazine, at Abokai, despite all the kpakpakpa moves, we've grown to learn that motion doesn't equal progress, and activity cannot equate to impact or productivity. Ghana's population of 30 million depend on 2,300 megawatts of power. Israel, with less than 10 million citizens, has in excess of 12,000 megawatts. While today's talk is not about economy per se, it's an important corridor to pass through in understanding the paradox that Ghana has become. Our informal economy is bursting at the seams. Lots of trade, lots of exchange, lots of buying and selling. Yet collectively, the whole of Kumasi, which has about 2 million economically active people, has only 47,000 registered taxpayers. This is what the Deputy Finance Minister told me. It's not my own facts. As a country, we spend millions of dollars importing rice, tomato paste, cooking oil, and frozen chicken, including chofi. These are products importing. In 2016 alone, Ghana spent $555 million on vegetable product imports, $592 on foodstuffs of all kinds, $643 on plastics and wrap, and $544 on animal products, $516 million on textiles. Our economic raw materials, largely finished or value-added products, resulted in Ghana spending about a quarter of our GDP in 2016, a whopping $12.5 billion on imports alone, with a sizable chunk of the amount spent on things we can produce here. And as if this were not paradoxical enough, in 2011, we were noted as the world's fastest grower. Our 14% was a record. Yet, we are still waiting by that 14% GDP growth. In fact, my lecturer, Boab Watin, did some calculations and showed that the employment elasticity of Ghana's economic growth in 2014 was below par. We are growing out of balance, but nobody is getting jobs from the growth. The economy suffers from growth without structural transformation. Our major exports are still raw: gold, crude oil, cocoa, timber. And already our mineral sector has become an enclave sector with limited participation of local companies. So apart from the tax revenues we get, we can't form strong companies. We don't learn anything about how that sector works. We need to begin a new conversation about value addition. We need a new conversation on economic productivity. We need a new conversation about ownership and regaining the commanding heights of the Ghanaian economy. And the debate in parliament will not be enough. Paradox 1 is over. Paradox 2, religion without morality. 70% of us go to church on Sunday. About 20-something% go to mosque on Friday. The rest believe in Odumankuma, Mausokbo Liza, Allah. As a Christian, I believe that one evidence of fear of God is impartation of life. For Christ said in John 10:10, I am come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. But our church and the Christian leadership in particular seem to have lost their way in being the conscience and guide of the nation. Because paraphrasing Apostle Paul, although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like unto corruptible man. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do things that are not fitting. Unquote. Our religious elite today seem to be imprisoned. The message of prosperity has taken over and eclipsed the message of sufficiency and simplicity. In our large churches, we are clapping hands and shooting the devil, while our minds are still enslaved by the chains of greed and selfishness. The gospel of Christ was meant to bring life and bring it in great abundance, but we live in a nation that has little regard for it. Deaths are reported as statistics, and the spate of loss of human life on our roads point to a nation which seems to have lost its grip on what the true value of life is. Money has been elevated over life, irrespective of how it is made. And there is no more truth in the land. Nobody questions the source of wealth, and our leaders, who ought to be the conscience of the nation, have become as guilty as the people they are meant to lead. 7 banks collapsed in the space of a year. Thousands of jobs lost. Millions of invested funds disappeared into thin air. As of now, we are still waiting for somebody to be brought to book. But this is the same society where people who steal dustbins get 3 years in prison, while those whose actions and inactions rob us of millions that could build hospitals, roads, and schools walk about in not just freedom but impunity. Over 2,000 lives perished on our roads in 2017, but for many, it's business as usual. A society that has no regard for life and does not cherish truth is what we are fast becoming. We had to wait for 193 to be knocked down on one of the major roads before the politicians got the impetus to rectify the situation. And even while doing that, they preferred to win the argument to say this wasn't their doing before solving the problem. 7 hospitals could not find space to treat a 72-year-old man whose family moved from one hospital to another from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., driving over 19 kilometers to get to a hospital whose doctors and nurses pray on Sundays and bow on Fridays. The no-bed syndrome became a mantra for health workers, most of whom are professing religious practitioners. But Isaiah said that these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. The paradox of the religious Ghanaian who has overturned the prescriptions and priorities of his faith and replaced them with the selfish personal ambition and greedy materialism deceitfully called prosperity. Woe to the Pharisees, for you pay tithes of the mint and the anise and the cumin, and you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. You have elevated the place of miracles, signs, and wonders, and neglected the weightier matters of law, justice, faith, and mercy. You have exalted the place of money and prosperity at the expense of morals and principles. You have idolized and deified our general overseers, and yet our members do not even appreciate the basic tenets of the faith they profess. We have built fanatical followers of church brands, but have failed in the role of growing disciples for Christ. We have elevated fancy suit-wearing, extravagant watch-clad prophetic preachers, jostling for space on our airwaves, and outdoing each other on primetime television. We have become fixated with a national cathedral, when Christ has clearly said that God does not dwell in temples made with hands. And many Christians including some who are here, who know better, will keep silent because for them, church membership and correctness is now like the fanatical support of their favorite football club. But this is not too surprising, because this is the era of the foot soldier. Everyone is whipped in line immediately they disagree with the views held by the unrelenting mass of party fanatics. And woe betide you if you cross them on social media. You could even lose your job because you made a tweet that was not nice. And while these things go on, injustice and greed has created distraction for our young people. The same youth we are promising miracles are living in droves via the Sahara Desert, dying in Lampedusa, making a desperate bid back to Europe. A recent survey by Pew Research Center showed that 75% of Ghanaian respondents said they would prefer to live in another country if they had the means and opportunity to go. 75%. That's 3 out of every 4. This compares very unfavorably with 74% of Nigerians, 54% of Kenyans, and 46% of Senegalese who would take the chance. How did we get here? A society with the right focus will make this a matter of national conversation. But a society that has lost its values is what we have become. Making armchair jokes about defilement when teachers are having sexual affairs with their students. The stool meme became the plaything of people on Facebook, with people buying truckloads of stools because a teacher slept with a student in a classroom on a stool. Our modern day social media infused celebrity culture has produced half-baked superstars, many of whom are overexposed but underdeveloped. We seem to have forgotten the biblical injunction of true religion, simplicity, fear of God, faith, and love. Paradox number 3. Generally, the freer a media is, the more open a society becomes, and the more responsive the governments are. Ghana is globally recognized for its relatively free media space. And whereas that freedom is supposed to lead to more effective governance and better quality discourses, in the curious case of Ghana, this doesn't appear to be the case. As I've said elsewhere, to analyze the state of the media, we need to assess the role of 3 important factors. Policy, which defines the rules. Best practice, which tells us what's happening elsewhere. and private participation who imagine what is possible by putting their money there. The Ghanaian media landscape today, therefore, is a combination of the efforts of government regulation through the NMC and the NCA, as well as the daring ideas of the Kofi Bedus, the Kofi Kumsons, the Kwesi Chums, the Nikamate Fius, and the Osei Kwame Despites. But effective media is not simply the existence of these institutions mentioned. It must have at its center competent, credible journalists who serve as the engine of a well-oiled machine. Journalists have three basic roles in society. We are gatekeepers. We decide what is important by setting the agenda. We are scorekeepers. We track what is being done by public officials, elected and unelected. We are also watchdogs. We set anas on judges and criminal sports administrators, and we get them sacked. But we need to ask ourselves, as gatekeepers, what kind of agenda we are setting collectively, and what we've done with the 26 years of Ghana's Fourth Republic. Which stories have the media given prominence to? Which people have we dedicated our front pages to? And who occupies our morning show slots? Our scorekeeping role is no different. Performed creditably, it must measure the size and quality of politicians' accomplishments against the grandiose nature of their promises. It mustn't reduce the conversation of performance to simply a comparison of mediocre records. Our watchdog role must relentlessly expose wrongdoing and highlight the plight of the disadvantaged. I'm going to now talk about how Ghana's media has contributed to the evolution of our political culture and therefore our conversation. Our political leaders understood the importance of the media in shaping the national discourse. Kwame Nkrumah's Evening News worked coterminously with Kwabena Bone's agitation on the street. The 1948 riots did not just happen. It was a coordinated effort between civil society and media. In the coup d'etat years, the Achampong government understood the power of the media. Even though I wasn't born, I am told. He popularized the rediffusion box as a means of reaching the people. People would gather around the box, which was hung in the town square, and at 1 p.m., they would listen to the news broadcast. Then there was entertainment of all kinds, and Achampong did his propaganda. But Ghana's fourth Republican democracy has reached an interesting stage. After liberalizing the airwaves, we saw a rise in the number of private commercial radio entities. Joy FM, Radio Gold, Sunshine, Groove FM, Peace FM. These stations came at a time the nation had been starved of the freedom of political discourse. For many years prior to 1995, the only thing close to political programming was Talking Point, which where I lived was boring 1 hour before the real show, Akan Drama. The rise because they introduced a format of political programming the citizens had been starved off under the Rawlings years. Radio Gold's Wednesday programs, Efson's File, BB Menson, The Verdict, Joy FM, Crossfire, Kakra Isamoa, Do Ajaho, Tony Edu, Kwame Nabatels, Malco Zomelo, the list goes on. Having opposing sides of a political argument and panel on a radio or TV show, although not entirely new, was such a refreshing addition to our newfound political life. This foundation became the template for the radio format that we practice today. But with 26 years of Fourth Republican democracy and over 400 radio stations, where is the democratic dividend promised? Where is the development and national shaping we hope for? Where is the coordinated agenda of ideas that media of this freedom should champion? Mathematicians, physicists, and business people gifted us a framework for analyzing relationships between things as they evolve over time. The S-curve shows 4 major stages of development of an organization, an entity, a country, an industry, or a civilization. It starts with introduction, rapid growth, plateau, after which you either decline or you grow incrementally. Our democratic experiment began and reached a very important zenith in the year 2000, where we changed government for the first time in years. It will be followed by the symbolic repealing of the criminal libel law by Kufuor, spawning many more media outlets, including the one I worked for Citi FM in 2004. In 2009, Ghana's democratic credentials had risen so much that President Obama had to ignore his native Kenya and come to Ghana because for the first time, a country had changed government from one party to the other. This was the period of rapid replication and tremendous growth of media. But after 17 years of that experiment, it looks like our media and our politics has reached an interesting plateau, where now what you used to send thrills down our ears sends chills down our spines. Because the plateau is where the pace of growth slows down and spirits begin to dampen. Our politics today is dominated by fighting talk and brinkmanship, occupying our airwaves. People whose main focus is how to capture power while in opposition or how to retain it when in government. In attaining maturity, we are finding out that some of our national problems are structural in nature and require much deeper thinking and broad consensus. The skill most required in introduction stage is experimentation. The skill required in the growth stage is replication. But when you get to a maturity stage, the skill most necessary for any industry to survive is reinvention. We are at a stage where if the media doesn't reinvent itself, it will become obsolete. And if our democracy doesn't reinvent itself, it will soon begin to stink and annoy a lot of citizens who have been deprived of access to resources. Our democracy is also characterized by a constitution which has created